Hello, I'm Keith Spera from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Welcome to Let's Talk. If you've ever driven a vehicle in South Louisiana, you've seen today's guest on a billboard. If something went terribly wrong while you were driving that vehicle, you may have also seen him in court. He is that rare personal injury attorney who hangs out with Lil Wayne, has family connections to James Brown, and whose name adorns the gospel tent at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. He is, of course, Morris Bart. Morris, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Keith. Happy to be here.
I got to tell you, one of your advertisements says, one click, that's it.
Right.
I sent you one email and you agreed to be here on the show. So you absolutely honored the terms of that advertisement.
So maybe I need to add to it. It should be one email, that's all. I have one click, that's all. One call, that's all. Maybe one email, that's all.
One call, that's all. That's got to be like one of the great Louisiana advertising slogans of all time. Who came up with that?
So I came up with that along with my agent at the time. Mm-hmm. This goes back, kind of an interesting story. At the advent of infomercials, this came out probably in the 80s, I'm thinking the mid-80s. Mm-hmm. And I was fascinated by it. I've always been a student of marketing and PR. And we call it now long format commercials. This is the 30-minute show, basically, mm-hmm. for a certain product or service. Mm-hmm. And you would watch it, and of course it has a toll-free number to call. And I was looking at that, just fascinated by it. So one night, I'm watching and an infomercial comes on for the Grapefruit 45 diet.
Grapefruit 45 diet.
I don't know if you remember that or not.
I do not.
So the Grapefruit 45 diet, the theory was that they had isolated this mysterious substance from grapefruits, which we now know as pectin, and I'm sure we knew it back then too. And they put pectin in a capsule, and supposedly if you took that Grapefruit 45 capsule at night, then overnight your body would metabolize all the fat in your body into a liquid form, and in the morning you would just urinate out all the fat. Huh. And then, of course, they had the testimonials of people saying, you know, I've been able to eat hamburgers and bacon and eggs and everything I love. Magic. And taking this pill, in 1 month I lost like outrageous amounts, 50 pounds, 70 pounds in 1 month, still eating the foods that I love. And they would have the before and after pill. So, not pill, but the before and after pictures. Uh-huh. And so I saw that and I said, wow, this is amazing. So I called up my agent and I went over there and I said, okay, I figured out how to market to America. America wants things that are quick and easy. They don't want to hear about diet. They don't want to hear about exercise. What they want to do is be able to live their life the way they want, take this pill, and lose weight. Mm-hmm. So we need to transfer that to law. We need to do something law-related. And so we started talking, okay, well, what do we do with lawyers? You can't take a pill.
Right.
You call lawyers. This was before computers, okay?
Right.
You call lawyers on the phone. So we started thinking, okay, you call lawyers on the phone. You can see where this is going. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe one call to a lawyer, one call does it all, and then finally it evolved to one call, that's all, because that's easy. What could be easier than retaining a lawyer by one call, that's all? So that was the advent of it. I thought the slogan was going to last for about a year, because as you remember, prior to that, my slogan used to be, I'm on your side.
Right.
And I like that slogan. We use it for a long time, but we felt like now it's time for a change. I never would have dreamed that in the year 2023, I'm still using one call, that's all. And lawyers all over America now have emulated me and copied that slogan, which I didn't trademark it because, you know, my thought was, look, I'm just going to use it in my area, which is Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And if lawyers want to use it elsewhere, fine, they can have at it. So now there literally are lawyers all over America that use one call, that's all, and think it's the greatest thing ever.
There you go. You never dreamed that you'd still be using that slogan, and I never dreamed that in an interview with you, the phrase "urinate out the fat" would come out. So that's
right. And
surprise
actually,
right here, yeah.
You know, if you stay around long enough, everything circles around. So maybe it's the appropriate time to bring back the 2023 version of the Grapefruit 45 and start pitching people that, hey, all you have to do is take this pill and urinate out your fat in the morning.
It started right here.
I think it would still work, don't you?
It started right here. What is y'all's advertising budget per year at your law firm?
So it's grown substantially, and we're now over a 3-state area. My main office is in New Orleans. New Orleans is the home office and also the office for the state of Louisiana. Gulfport is the home office for Mississippi, and Birmingham's the home office for Alabama. So among the 3-state area, our television budget is $25 million a year.
$25 million
a year.
In television?
Yes, in television.
And what do you spend on billboards? Because I mean, it seems like you own just about every billboard.
Yeah, we have hundreds and hundreds of billboards, but it's small by comparison, probably several $1 million. But you know, the lion's share, the foundation of my marketing program, and I think of any legal marketing program, and I would contend for virtually any business, is still television.
Yeah.
That although there are many stories now about the demise of television and how everything is shifting away from traditional television to streaming, and yes, the viewership is dropping. And then there's, among advertisers, there's talk about how it's all shifted to digital advertising. And yes, digital is a very strong component of any advertising. It's not like it used to be, where I'd run an ad on channels 4, 6, and 8.
Right.
And we could do a news roadblock, so meaning if I ran ads at 6 p.m. on the news, you had to see my ad because there's nothing else to watch.
Right.
Now you've got 900 channels on cable, you've got streaming, you've got digital. So it's not that simple anymore. You have to have a robust television campaign complemented by a very effective digital marketing campaign, both on the paid and non-paid side. And you have to have social media, and you have to have outdoor and radio. So it's become a multifaceted, multi-platform program to have successful marketing and reach the consumer, because the consumer is diffused. They not confused, diffused. Meaning that they get their sources of information from many different platforms.
So you spend over $30 million a year in advertising.
Right.
So obviously, I mean, the revenue has to justify that. Were y'all advertising recently something about $1 billion in settlements that y'all are in?
We have. I mean,
is that over the course of?
Yeah, that's over the course, and that was a few years ago. We've blown past that now.
Blown past $1 billion.
But
yes.
But obviously, like any business, you got to make more money than you spend.
Sure.
Otherwise, you don't have a successful business.
Absolutely.
And that becomes the very difficult part for law firms, that you have to back up your advertising with a team of very good lawyers. They have to be able to take these cases, know how to litigate them, know how to negotiate, know how to get top dollar, so that, number one, first and foremost, the client is satisfied. The client knows that they got a good settlement or judgment on that case, and that we fought for them. Then we take a fee. Lawyers, personal injury lawyers, take a percentage of that.
Usually a third or something like that?
Usually a third, right.
Yeah,
it varies, sometimes a little lower, sometimes a little more, depending on the complexity of the case and whether it's litigated or not litigated. But you take that fee, and so you have to satisfy your client, and you have to generate enough money to pay for a large advertising budget and overhead, the lawyer who handled the case, and still have some profit left over. That's where it becomes very difficult for law firms to do it. And some firms, unfortunately, have tried to take the easy way out, the low-hanging fruit of just becoming what they call settlement mills, getting mass numbers of cases and settling them for whatever they want, and then moving on. That happened recently, very unfortunate, with this law firm out of Houston that came in here, did massive advertising, and scooped up thousands and thousands of Hurricane Ida cases. And then, shockingly, didn't even have lawyers handling it. They prided themselves that, because they tried to recruit several of my lawyers, which fortunately never went to them, but these lawyers told me that their pitch was, if you come and work for us, you never have to talk to a client.
Oh my gosh, that seems counterintuitive to what the whole thing's all about.
That we have paralegals that will talk to the clients, negotiate the case with the insurance company, which of course is the unauthorized practice of law, very illegal, but they're being called to task for that now.
Yep.
And they would settle the case, and they would go to the settlement conference with the client and have them sign the papers. That's it. The client never saw, never talked to a lawyer, never met a lawyer.
That's insane.
So that's the dark side of it.
Yeah.
The good side of it is that you have many firms, very good firms that advertise, and many good firms that don't advertise, that step up and do a good job.
When is the last time that you litigated a case personally?
So I'm involved in a different way since I serve primarily as the managing partner of what's gotten to be a very large firm.
And the figurehead. I mean, you're the figurehead of the whole operation.
I am, I'm the spokesperson. And so we now have over 100 lawyers, support staff of 300. We have 17 offices across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Somebody's got to run all that. And so that's become my job, and that's primarily what I'm involved in. Having said that, I still go to court for certain cases, and I'm involved in it mainly as a team. I was in court recently on the Bob Dean cases. This is the one where he took these elderly people that were in his nursing homes during the hurricane and put them in that horrible warehouse outside of Baton Rouge. And we got a large number of cases, and so I've been in court with my team of lawyers, making arguments, litigating that. I've been in court as recently as last week on the hurricane cases, because we've taken over a huge amount of cases from that firm in Houston, McClenny Mosley. I've actually run ads encouraging clients to come to us because the Supreme Court of Louisiana has told those lawyers, you can't practice in Louisiana.
Oh, man.
You're suspended from practicing. So yeah, I still get in court on special cases.
You still enjoy it? You still like it? You still like being in the courtroom?
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ideal for me to do it, and in a very, we can talk about this. This is an aside, but I'll just throw this out. I've also been in court with the DA's office now, in my position as a volunteer assistant district attorney.
Which is a whole different kind of
totally different. Totally different.
Have you ever gotten to stand up in court and say you can't handle the truth? The famous Jack Nicholson line from A Few Good Men.
No,
you haven't gotten to say that.
That's a line I don't know.
You haven't gotten to slam the.
I don't know that I would ever use that in court. I mean, to me, it's great for Hollywood, but I think it comes across as just kind of smug and arrogant, and I think a judge would be outraged by me saying that. I'd probably be held in contempt. And I think a jury would probably say, who is this jerk? I can handle anything. You don't tell me what I can't handle.
Speaking of Hollywood, you've dabbled in Hollywood a little bit. You've produced some films, and you have showbiz connections in the family.
Yes.
Most prominently, your family connection to the Godfather of Soul, James Brown.
Yes.
Your uncle, was it great uncle or uncle?
Great uncle.
Great uncle.
Ben
represented
Bart.
James Brown for much of his career, right?
Right.
So he discovered him. How would we say? What was his relationship with James?
Well, he founded, my uncle Ben Bart founded a very large talent agency in New York called Universal Attractions. They specialized in representing African American musicians, which, Motown back then, it was a very prominent niche at the time, but also one that he was able to build up because, back then there was racism in the entertainment industry, and a lot of the black performers were shunned by the traditional agencies. So that was the niche he founded. I heard that he flew down when James Brown first started singing and performing. He went down there. I think James Brown was a shoeshine boy, and he went down there and discovered him and made him the star of who he is. And James Brown was obviously very grateful for it. I remember one time when I was in high school, sitting around with friends. This would have been probably in the early 70s, and we were watching Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson was interviewing James Brown that night, which is why I was watching it.
Right.
And I still remember Johnny Carson asking James Brown, he said, now, you've been all over the world, you've met kings and presidents, and who's the most important person you've ever met in your life? He said, without question, that was Ben Bart. And I remember,
your uncle.
I remember feeling so proud. Here I'm sitting with my friends in New Orleans, and he says Ben Bart. So that was really wonderful. And yeah, I got the occasion to meet him in person, actually, in the 60s. He was performing at Municipal Auditorium. And so they took me back into his dressing room. and I was able to sit with him at his dressing table. I still remember while his groomers, I guess you would call them, they were teasing up his hair.
Sure.
Back in the 60s, he had like this big pompadour.
Right.
And they were teasing it up with combs. And it was fascinating to me. I guess what was most fascinating is that I was sitting there, and he was very courteous. Oh, you're Ben Bart's nephew. I'm so happy to meet you. Ben's been wonderful to me. And we're having a very normal conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lead me out, and we walk out. We had front row seats. And all of a sudden he comes on the stage, and he's wild. And, you know, they like, you know, back there they put the cape on him, they'd pat him on the shoulder and try
Right.
to take him off the stage.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he'd start jumping up and down, shake off the cape, and he'd run, you know, back to the microphone, start singing. And I was a very impressionable kid at the time. I was probably 12 years old. And I remember thinking, how is that? What did he take, or what did he do? Because a few minutes ago, he was talking to me as very normal.
Right.
And now he's wild. And of course, now I realize just great acting. That's what you call being a great performer. That you not only have to have the talent to sing and create music, this phenomenal musical talent, but you also have to be great at acting. And I'm just a quick diversion. So then many years later, I'm in college. I'm at the University of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the campus entertainment board. We bring in, now we're in the early 70s, I'd say, we bring in Jethro Tull to perform.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And being on the board, I got to go back in their dressing room and just kind of hang out with them. So
Right.
it's the 70s, and I thought, man, I'm going to go back there. There's going to be tables of drugs everywhere. They're going to be drinking bottles of tequila straight from the bottle. It's going to be a wild show.
Right.
And I walk in there, and all of them could not have been more serious. I remember Ian Anderson, he's doing like these wind drills on his flute, you know, just kind of practicing. The other guys, you know, very subdued, shaking my hand, and, you know, just
English gentlemen.
nothing.
Just
Yeah,
gentlemen.
nothing. I don't even think there was any booze back there. Nothing. They're very, very serious. And all of a sudden then, so then I come out and I go right in the front, because that's where I was supposed to be, being on this board. And all of a sudden they come out, and they're wild. I mean, Ian Anderson, his eyes are like so big, they're bulging. And he's looking at everybody in the audience like he's out of his mind. And I started thinking back to James Brown. It's the same thing, that he's totally sober, no drugs, no alcohol, nothing. And yet here he is, he comes on stage and is wild.
And turns
Same
it on.
thing.
Yeah.
That's a star performer. That's what they can do.
You, a few years ago, there was a biopic movie about James Brown. You went up to the premiere in New York at the
Right.
Apollo Theater. Mick Jagger was one of the producers of the film.
Right.
So you got to meet Mick up there,
Yes.
right? You and Kathy, your wife, got to hang out with Mick. Did you inquire as to whether or not he needed any legal services or anything, or was he covered as far
I
as
don't, you know, you only get in his orbit for a very brief time.
Okay.
And actually, to be quite honest, that's the only person in the world I've ever wanted to meet.
Really?
Was Mick Jagger. And so it was very exciting. Yeah, he was an executive producer. We went up to Harlem. They had the world premiere of Get On Up at the Apollo Theater. Kathy and I were able to walk the red carpet and go into the Apollo Theater for the screening. They had Brian Grazer, I think is how you say it.
Brian Grazer, yep,
Brian
producer,
Grazer
Hollywood
was there. He was
producer,
the producer, along with Mick Jagger. And so they got up and they introduced the movie, and they talked a little bit about James Brown.
Right.
And then we saw the world premiere of it. Dan Aykroyd played my uncle Ben Bart in the movie, which was very exciting. And so then after they had erected a tent right next to the Apollo Theater. So when the show was over, we walked next door into the tent for the like private VIP party that they had. And we go in there, and there at a high top table right by the bar by himself is Mick Jagger. So it was just, I should not really by himself, because he had his bodyguard right next to him.
Sure.
But there was no one else there, so it was an amazing opportunity. So I went up, I introduced myself. He didn't seem that interested. And then I said, you know, my uncle is Ben Bart, who Dan Aykroyd played. And then all of a sudden, the door opens. Then he was very friendly. He said, oh, I'm a big fan of your uncle. I knew him. It's wonderful what he did. And so I made the best banter I could for a couple of minutes about that. And then, his bodyguard, I wanted to take a picture, so I gave the camera to his bodyguard, my camera, and he took a picture of us, which was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so I was holding my breath that the picture came out well, which it did. But interesting, when you get in that orbit, and I was only in his orbit for a few minutes, the two things I noticed. One is, while we were there, it's like every good-looking woman at the party kept like walking right by the table.
Sure.
And then one of the waiters, who was like holding his trays, collecting drinks, all of a sudden he saw Mick Jagger there. And so he walks over to the two of us while we're there, puts his tray down on the ground with the drinks, and starts breakdancing right in front of us.
Just to impress Mick.
Yeah, I guess so. And Mick just looks at him, gives him like a little polite applause, and then the guy picks up his tray and goes on.
Moves on. Oh, well, that's interesting.
So that 2 minutes in his orbit.
When you're Mick Jagger, people break out and break dancing, and every beautiful woman in the room passes by.
Absolutely.
It's a good life.
That's in just 2 minutes.
It's a good life to be Mick Jagger.
Yes, it is.
Speaking of more local celebrities, you used to sit next to Lil Wayne at Pelicans games, and that led to you being a sponsor of Louisiana Fest, Lil Wayne's big festival. You weren't familiar with Lil Wayne's music at the time, correct? I mean, was that who introduced you? Was that a nephew or somebody that introduced you?
Yeah, so what happened was I was sitting next to him, and my nephew, David, who was probably 10, 12 years old at the time, would be my guess, maybe a little bit older. It could have been his early teens. He comes to me after the game one time. He goes, "Uncle Buddy, you know who you're sitting next to?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Oh, that's Lil Wayne." He goes, "Lil Wayne, I love him. He's this big singer." He goes, "Would you mind asking him? I'm having my birthday party this Sunday. Would you mind asking him if he would come to my birthday party?" And I said, "All right, David, I'll mention it to him, but I don't think he's going to be interested in doing that if he's a big star." I did mention it to him, but no, he wasn't interested.
Wasn't interested?
No.
No.
But I do have a funny Lil Wayne story I can tell you.
Sure.
So one time I'm talking to him, and he's got, I didn't know it was called a grill, but at the time, he's got diamonds. All his teeth are diamond encrusted, pave diamonds, diamond encrusted. So I asked him, I said, "Lil Wayne, why do you have all those diamonds in your mouth?" Without missing a beat, he goes, "Man, I don't believe in cheap talk."
That's great, and that's why he's Lil Wayne, because he has a way with words.
Yeah.
We only a few minutes left here. You also sat next to Quint Davis, the Jazz and Heritage Festival producer at games, and lo and behold, you ended up sponsoring the gospel tent at this year's Jazz Fest. So that was another. Apparently, if you sit next to you at a game, you'll end up sponsoring your festival.
Yeah, well, I'm very social. I like to talk to people, and Quint and I started talking. And actually, it was kind of a funny conversation because I asked him, I said, is Rhodes Funeral Home still sponsoring the gospel tent? And he starts laughing and said, "They haven't sponsored it in 20 years. I said, "Really? Are you sure? I mean, I see so clearly the Rhodes Funeral Home banner hanging in the gospel tent." He goes, "No, they haven't done it for 20 years. So, of course, that led to us saying, well, I'd be interested in doing it. And one thing led to another. We started talking to the Jazz Fest officials. What was very important to me as part of my sponsorship was I wanted to give 2 free tickets to every gospel singer from a local church, which is a big ask. And eventually they agreed to do it. So I'm proud to say that they gave me 1,100 free tickets to give to the 545 local gospel singers from local churches, and my firm then distributed 2 tickets to every gospel singer.
Wow.
They were very, very grateful for it. I spent a huge amount of time in the gospel tent.
Did you?
I love it anyway.
Yeah.
And it was kind of home base for me. So I stayed there, and I went every day to Jazz Fest, most amazing Jazz Fest I've ever been to. Absolutely loved it. And I'm now re-upping for several more years.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Oh, great. Hanging out in the gospel tent, is that a way to absolve your profession of all of its sins, all the attorneys?
No, I couldn't spend enough time to do that.
Enough time to do that?
That would take a lot of time.
We've only got a couple minutes left here, but I want to mention, I mean, we talked earlier about your legal advertising and how you were one of the pioneers of that in Louisiana. But you mentioned to me that you have an artifact from one of the very first people to actually advertise his legal services?
Yeah, so that's Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe. And in 1857, 3 years before he became president in 1860, he used to run ads for his law firm in the local newspaper. I think it was the Springfield Gazette. And so I had heard that. It was an urban legend. I had a friend of mine that was in historical documents, went to a conference in Chicago, found someone selling it. I bought it, put it in a hermetically sealed frame. And so now, hanging in my office, I have an actual copy from 1857 of Abraham Lincoln's ad.
Wow. Wow. So you essentially are just carrying on the tradition that Abe Lincoln started.
That's one way to put it, except I'm not going to run for president.
No, huh?
No, politics is not in my blood. I'm very happy with my day job.
Well, with your day job and your sideline in the entertainment business, I mean, that's
it's been fun to dabble in, just like the the film business. I've produced 3 films. My biggest one being Factory Girl, with Sienna Miller, Hayden Christensen, Jimmy Fallon, a biopic about the life of Edie Sedgwick, which I sold the rights to Harvey Weinstein at the Sundance Film Festival.
Oops.
So that was a very exciting moment. That's about as good as it gets when you're an independent film producer. Of course, he crashed and burned after that.
Yes, he did.
But at that time, he was the #1 independent film producer in the world, so it was quite an honor to have him buy the film and promote it. And it became a cult classic. It still has a following. It still runs on television every now and then. So it was definitely an interesting experience.
Well, you dabble in all these things, but you're not giving up your day job anytime soon.
No, love what I do.
Amen. Well, great. Well, Morris, this has been really good. Hope some folks learned some new things about you today, and I appreciate you coming down here and sharing some of these stories.
Great. Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you for the opportunity to come and share these stories. I appreciate it.
And I'll see you in the Gospel Tent next year, apparently.
Sounds good.
All right. Good deal.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm Keith Spera. This has been Let's Talk.